Ravi Malhotra was just a quiet night security guard, and Eleanor Voss was a reclusive billionaire widow, two people from opposite worlds who should have never crossed paths. But when their secret romance turned into a deadly obsession, it ignited a chain of events that ended in poison, betrayal, and a fortune soaked in mystery. Ravi Malhotra arrived in Los Angeles with a suitcase full of hopes and a visa that gave him just enough time to find his footing. Like many others chasing the American dream, he took what he could get. A job as a night security guard at one of Beverly Hills' grandest estates wasn't glamorous, but it paid better than anything else he could find. The estate belonged to Eleanor Voss, a name that appeared in luxury magazines and whispered conversations among the elite. Her husband, a tech mogul, had died under mysterious circumstances 2 years prior, and since then, Eleanor had retreated from the public eye. Ravi's job was simple: patrol the estate, monitor the security cameras, and keep the gates locked at night. The mansion was massive white marble pillars, sprawling gardens, and halls that echoed with silence. Ravi never ventured far from the security room unless he had to. It was a place of quiet luxury, a stark contrast to the cramped apartment he shared with two other immigrants in Van Nuys. There he spent his mornings sleeping and his afternoons walking to the bus stop, keeping to himself and sending most of his paycheck back to his aging mother in India. He was invisible in the world of Beverly Hills, the kind of worker that people noticed only when something went wrong. The gardeners, drivers, and other staff barely spoke to him, and Eleanor Voss, she was more myth than person. Her silhouette sometimes appeared in the windows, but no one on the staff could recall the last time they spoke to her directly. Rumors filled the silence that she was mentally unwell, that she had developed strange obsessions, that she was preparing to vanish from public life altogether. Ravi never paid much attention to gossip. He was there to work. But in the long, lonely hours of the night, he began to notice small details that made him feel like he was being watched, a curtain drawn slightly aside, lights flickering in rooms no one entered, and the hum of music playing faintly upstairs when the rest of the house was asleep. He tried not to think about it, convincing himself that his mind was playing tricks on him. Still, there was something unsettling about the place, something quiet and heavy. Then one night things changed. A message came through his walkie-talkie, a voice, female and soft, asked him to come to the back entrance of the house. Surprised, he followed instructions and found Eleanor Voss standing at the door. Dressed in a silk robe and holding a glass of wine, she looked older than her photos but carried herself with eerie elegance. She invited him inside. That was the beginning. He didn't tell anyone, not the other staff, not his roommates, not even his mother. What started as a single visit soon turned into regular encounters, always late, always discreet. Ravi had no idea how deep he was walking into a life that wasn't meant for someone like him. The quiet guard had entered a lavish world, and it was about to change everything. In the weeks following that first unexpected invitation, Ravi found himself drawn into a world he never imagined he'd be a part of. Eleanor Voss, once just a distant figure seen behind thick curtains and surveillance monitors, became someone he saw up close, someone who began to shape his nights. Their meetings were unplanned at first, short conversations by the back door, occasional requests for assistance, questions about his life in India. She seemed curious but not condescending. She listened, something Ravi wasn't used to in this city. Before long, the encounters became routine. Eleanor began requesting his presence more frequently, always after midnight when the estate was still and the rest of the staff had gone home. Sometimes they talked in her study, a warm room lined with old books and paintings worth more than Ravi could comprehend. Other times, she asked him to sit with her in the garden where the city lights glowed in the distance. She would sip her wine and speak about her late husband, about the loneliness that followed his death, and about how the people around her treated her like a ghost. Ravi didn't understand why she had chosen him, of all people. He had no wealth, no status, but Eleanor seemed to find comfort in his presence. He, in turn, was captivated by her confidence and the effortless luxury that surrounded her. She spoke with authority, yet revealed pieces of vulnerability he hadn't expected. What started as a connection grounded in curiosity slowly became something deeper, something they both knew had to be kept hidden. It was an arrangement built on secrecy. Eleanor warned him never to enter the house through the main entrance, never to stay too long, never to say a word to anyone. She trusted him, she said, and he took that trust seriously. He would wait until the security cameras pointed away, until the motion detectors were deactivated, then slip through the side door. To anyone watching the footage, he was just a guard doing rounds, nothing unusual. But people noticed patterns. The housekeeper began spotting small changes. Perfume she didn't recognize lingering in certain rooms, a sweater out of place, a coffee mug with unfamiliar lipstick stains. She didn't say anything at first, but began to watch more closely. Then there was Eleanor's lawyer, an older man named Charles Dunning, who had managed her affairs for over a decade. He sensed something different about her too. She started canceling meetings, refusing to return calls, and once even missed a scheduled board meeting for her foundation. That had never happened before. Still, nothing concrete tied Ravi to Eleanor. They were careful. But the more time they spent together, the more their secret relationship began to blur the lines between infatuation and danger. Ravi started receiving expensive gifts, a designer watch, a set of monogrammed cufflinks, even an envelope with \5000 in cash for emergencies. He accepted them cautiously, unsure whether this was love, manipulation, or something in between. What he didn't know was that someone else was beginning to follow the trail, someone who would soon uncover what they had tried so hard to keep hidden. 6 months into the affair, Eleanor Voss made a decision that would shift everything. Without informing anyone in her inner circle, she contacted a private notary and signed a new will. It was a clean break from the past. Her foundation, charities, and extended family were pushed aside. In the updated document, a significant portion of her estate, including a beachside villa and millions in liquid assets, was assigned to Ravi Malhotra. She listed him as a close companion and trusted confidant. The move was drastic, even shocking, for a woman known for guarding her wealth and privacy. Charles Dunning, her longtime attorney, found out about the new will weeks later when he was asked to review her estate files by one of her accountants. He was stunned. Eleanor had never once mentioned Ravi, let alone hinted at giving him such a large share of her fortune. Charles, a meticulous man who had served the Voss family for decades, didn't believe in coincidences. He immediately suspected foul play, either manipulation or coercion, and hired a private investigator to look into the security guard's background. Meanwhile, inside the mansion, the housekeeper, Marta, continued to observe subtle changes. Eleanor was distracted. She stayed up later than usual, often appearing in the kitchen at odd hours with traces of red wine on her lips and a strange calmness in her demeanor. Marta once found Eleanor sitting in the music room, staring at nothing, humming a song she hadn't played in years. It was unsettling, but what truly disturbed Marta was the missing items: a silver cufflink from Mr. Voss's collection, a wristwatch from the master bedroom drawer, and an antique perfume bottle. When she asked Eleanor about them, she brushed it off. "Just misplaced," she said. Then the note arrived. It was tucked inside Eleanor's private mailbox, which only the postman and a few trusted people had access to. Written on plain white paper in block letters, it read, **, he's not who you think he is. Be careful. **, there was no signature, no indication of who had written it. Eleanor never reported the message to anyone, but she began to grow anxious. She avoided eye contact with the staff, canceled a public appearance at an art fundraiser, and started keeping the gates locked even during daylight hours. Despite the fear creeping into her life, she continued seeing Ravi. If anything, she clung to him more. He was her escape, the one person who seemed genuine in a world that felt increasingly cold. Ravi noticed the change in her mood. She smiled less, drank more, and asked strange questions about loyalty and betrayal. He didn't know about the will, the investigation, or the note. He thought the pressure was just the result of their secret becoming too heavy, but others were closing in. The private investigator, now watching Ravi's movements, was documenting every late-night visit. Every moment Eleanor appeared in his presence, the pieces were falling into place. Someone was preparing to expose the truth, and no one knew what would happen when the story finally unraveled. The storm hit Beverly Hills just before dawn. Rain fell in sheets, and the usually quiet estate of Eleanor Voss seemed even more lifeless under the gray sky. That morning, Marta arrived for her shift and immediately sensed something was wrong. The lights inside the house were still on, which was unusual. Eleanor preferred darkness, especially in the early hours. The front door was locked, but a side door had been left slightly ajar. Marta stepped inside, calling out softly. No answer. She walked through the marble corridors, heart beating faster with every step. When she reached Eleanor's bedroom, she paused. The door was half open and the room was too still. Eleanor lay motionless on the bed, her head resting gently on the pillow. Beside her was a bottle of sleeping pills, uncapped and nearly empty. A half-full glass of water stood on the nightstand. The housekeeper called 911 with trembling hands, barely able to speak. When the paramedics arrived, they declared Eleanor Voss dead at the scene. The police found no signs of forced entry, no signs of struggle. Everything looked peaceful. The assumption was immediate suicide. A grieving widow, lonely and burdened, had taken her life. The housekeeper cried as she was questioned, insisting that Eleanor had seemed unsettled lately, but nothing indicated she would take such a step. News of her death spread quickly. By noon, media vans were parked outside the gate, and the story had begun circulating on social media. Beverly Hills billionaire found dead in apparent suicide. But the quiet did not last long. 3 days later, Charles Dunning made the new will public. Journalists were stunned. The name *Ravi Malhotra* exploded across headlines. Security guard inherits fortune. They wrote. The narrative shifted from tragic loss to shocking scandal. Reporters flooded Ravi's neighborhood, trying to find him. But he had already been detained. The police, reacting to public outcry and media pressure, reopened the case. The initial autopsy revealed a startling twist. Though sleeping pills were present, the toxicology report identified a rare synthetic sedative in Eleanor's system, one not found in any of her prescriptions. It was slow, acting and virtually untraceable without advanced testing. The manner of death was reclassified as suspicious. Authorities turned to Ravi. The timing of the will, the inheritance, and his secret relationship all painted him as the perfect suspect. His apartment was searched. There, officers found several luxury items, jewelry, designer watches, and envelopes filled with cash. One of the watches matched a piece Marta had reported missing weeks earlier. A second search uncovered a phone with deleted messages, some from Eleanor, some untraceable. To the public, Ravi looked guilty. A man from a modest background entangled with a powerful woman, now potentially responsible for her death. But behind the headlines, the story was more complicated. The timeline wasn't airtight. The security system logs were incomplete, and then came the break. Through a hard drive from an old backup server, forgotten in a locked cabinet, was found by accident. On it was a fragment of security footage from the night of Eleanor's death, one that would change the course of the entire investigation. The fragment of footage recovered from the forgotten backup drive was grainy and incomplete, but it was enough to disrupt the case. Time, stamped just hours before Eleanor Voss's death, it showed a figure entering the estate through the rear service entrance, a figure that was not Ravi Malhotra. The person wore a dark jacket and moved with practiced precision, avoiding motion detectors and surveillance blind spots, almost as if they knew the layout intimately. Investigators slowed the footage frame by frame and finally matched the figure's gait and build to someone unexpected, the private investigator hired by Charles Dunning. This revelation shattered the narrative the media had already begun to cement. Until then, Ravi had been the focus. His foreign background, his quiet demeanor, his unlikely relationship with a billionaire had made for irresistible headlines. But now the story shifted. Why had the investigator been on the property without alerting anyone? Why had he hidden his visit? When confronted, the investigator at first denied everything. Under pressure and with mounting evidence, he finally confessed to being inside the estate that night. He claimed he had gone to speak with Eleanor to confront her about the revised will. He insisted his intention was not to harm her, but to convince her to reconsider. According to him, she grew upset during their conversation and began to threaten legal action against Charles Dunning for interference. Panicked and fearing the situation would escalate, he gave her a mild sedative from his own supply, something to calm her down, but he miscalculated the dosage. He said he didn't mean for her to die. The authorities didn't buy the accidental angle completely, but the confession changed everything. Ravi was immediately removed from the suspect list. However, his legal troubles were far from over. During the investigation, it had come to light that he had overstayed his visa and was working under expired documentation. With public attention still heavy on the case, immigration authorities stepped in. Despite not being involved in the murder, Ravi was detained for deportation proceedings. As for Charles Dunning, investigators found no direct link between him and the poisoning, but the entire affair cast a dark shadow over his reputation. He quietly stepped down from managing Eleanor's estate. The will that granted Ravi a portion of her fortune was contested by distant relatives and placed under legal review. With Ravi out of the country and the estate frozen in court, most of what Eleanor had tried to leave behind was lost in a web of legal battles. Ravi was sent back to India weeks later with nothing but the clothes he came with and a few of Eleanor's letters, which he had managed to save. He never spoke to the press. He disappeared into the crowded streets of New Delhi, just another man with a story no one would ever fully understand. The Beverly Hills mansion was eventually sold to a tech investor. The staff was replaced. The story faded from headlines, but in quiet corners of the city, people still whispered about the guard who fell in love with a billionaire, and how it all ended in betrayal, greed, and death.